On May 4th from 10 to 4 p.m., you're invited to a future shaping conversation about business education here in Middlebury. It'll be at Semino House. You will be receiving a pre-workshop packet Monday, I hope, and you will find these 6 items in that packet. In this presentation, this kind of welcome presentation, what I want to do is give you an overview of some design and decision criteria, which are really important as we talk together on Friday. May 4th, I want to outline some options for content of a new approach to business education, as well as outline options for delivery modes, the architecture of the program. How do we actually deliver the education? Before going there, a reminder that the 4 facilitators have been together, the Future of Business Education Synthesis Team, as we've been calling it, since November. And then recently, about a month ago, we added 3 more people to the team, Frederick Kropp, Yue Shi, and Sarah Springer, as we moved into a new phase of our the synthesis team / facilitation team. Our goals have been these 5: to support idea generation here on campus by reaching out to a variety of stakeholder groups, to listen to what they had to say about how they see Middlebury's future role and niche as it relates to business education. We've engaged external perspectives also, largely through perusal of secondary sources, other people, other organizations, other schools, other think tanks who have been thinking about what the future of business education should be or could be or can be. We've also taken quite seriously the alignment of this process and where we are now and how and what we will be talking about on Friday with the wider Envisioning Middlebury strategic framework. And finally, the addition of 3 new members was largely designed to help us fine-tune and sharpen the May 4th participant pack, of which this is a part, as well as helping design the workshop process on May 4th. And Frederick and Sarah will be facilitating that process. I think it's important to kind of step back and ask ourselves the question, why care about business? Why care about business education? We're ending the MBA program. Why are we having this conversation? Why even think about it? First answer is the Middlebury mission, which reads in part that we prepare students to address the world's most challenging problems. Now, I'd argue the world's most challenging problems are like a 3-legged stool. One leg is good, crisp, innovative public policy. A second leg is a robust and vibrant civil society. But a third leg is important. If we don't have that third leg, that chair, that stool will tip over. And that's the private sector. That is market enterprises. It's the 3 of these things together which can help us make a dent in, attack the world's most challenging problems. Ashoka founder Bill Drayton said the following about a year ago: the substantive impact we need to avoid catastrophe and reconfigure existing systems, he's talking about the world's most challenging problems, will be achieved far more through incremental shifts in corporate behavior than through revolutionary ones in the nonprofit or entrepreneurial sectors. You may or may not agree with him. I think that he's leaving out the public sector here. In other words, good, innovative public policy is essential. But his emphasis on how important the private sector and private sector actors are is prescient and spot on. Here are a set of design parameters or criteria for decision making that are really important. And we're going to have these up on the walls on May 4th, but I wanted to briefly go over them right now. The first is, whatever we decide, we have to attract new and lifelong learners. We need new learners in our system. We know that. We've been talking about it. We need to fit better into their schedules, into their lifestyles, into their geographies, into their career stage. I was recently at an academic conference and a keynote speaker talking about lifelong learners and talking about how universities have to engage much more seriously in that business of lifelong learning. He called it the end of alums. In other words, he was saying the university of the future never stops educating, and so therefore never has your typical alum. Now that's a provocative way of looking at it. We need to connect ever more. We're connected already. We've been connected in the past, but we need to push ourselves to connect ever more our business education and other disciplines, degree programs, and parts of the Middlebury global system. It's an essential success factor. We need to push ourselves to leverage faculty across the system. We need to look at who is teaching in Vermont. We need to look at who is teaching here at the Institute. We need to look at who's teaching in the 2 schools here. We need to look at who's teaching at the schools abroad, and we need to think very, very large and strategically about leveraging faculty across this entire system. We need to build on our experiential learning strengths. It is a strength of the Institute. It's a strength of our current MBA program. If you think of the raw case methodology of which we've been a pioneer in many ways, it's one of the reasons why our students win in Davos. We have a strength here, and we need to really push ourselves to think about how to leverage it even more. We need an idea or a set of ideas that excite and captivate faculty across the system. We, of course, have to be serious about our ability to carry out whatever we decide. We need to be practical and realistic about where we are right now, the constraints that we face right now, and I would argue open our minds up to a sequence of initiatives, perhaps over the next 3, 4, 5, even longer years, in terms of how we're thinking about business education. We don't necessarily need a big bang approach that suddenly everything starts fully thought through in September of 2019. But we do need to be realistic about our ability to pull off. We need to have a good conversation about return on investment and payback horizons. And finally, we need to be serious about, or think hard about, what is the impact that we want our business education to make on the world. Does it really address the world's most challenging problems? So moving on, I told you earlier I wanted to talk a little bit in this preparatory presentation about content and structure. From the content perspective, I'm really talking about what's the meat of the program. What are the competencies that we are trying to inculcate in students? From a structural standpoint, I'm talking much more about things like, well, is it a degree program? Is it certificates? Is it specializations? Where does it happen? Is it online? Is it not online? That's what I mean by structure. And we have important decisions to shape on May 4th with regards to both of these areas. And of course, they're linked, but they're also importantly separate. From the delivery option standpoint, here's a broad lay of the land. We could be thinking about a new degree program. And then within that degree program, are we talking here at MIS in Monterey? Are we talking about a degree that would be somehow importantly shared and connected across the Middlebury system? Are we talking about a partnership with another institution? Think of the NPTS and NGIMO degree program that we have right now. Those are all options. Those are all delivery options that we have to talk about on Friday and beyond. And then there's a large bucket of what's called non-degree programs. We don't have to do a degree program as a follow-up if we don't want to, or if we don't think that that's the right niche for us. But even when we look at non-degree programs, we need to then have conversations about, is it a certificate? Is it a specialization related to what other current existing degree programs? If we're talking about non-degree programs, we need to start thinking about partnerships with organizations and sectors. If we're talking about non-degree programs that are kind of in the line of, let's call it executive ed or continuing education, then those kinds of partnerships become even more important. So we have these delivery options. that almost no matter what the content is, you can imagine a different kind, you can imagine multiple ways of actually delivering the content that we think is important. And then, of course, finally, whether it's online or blended, as I mentioned that before. I wanted to lay out 4 options where we are right now. Where do these options come from? They came from talking with stakeholders here on campus and outside of campus. They came from looking at what other people are saying about the future of business education. They came from a light competitor analysis. They come from a, triangulating also with the job analysis that CACS has done that will be in your pre-reading packet. It comes from thinking about what our current strengths are, and it comes from what our degree programs are saying that they need. So it's a combination of things, and our attempt in the group has been to synthesize what we think that we're hearing from you. And at times, that synthesis can mean going beyond the strict confines of what perhaps various stakeholders said to us. But we see 4 options right now. The first option we call the business society policy approach. In this approach, students would learn to influence the relationships between businesses, society, and policy to address complex, wicked problems. The kinds of careers that this approach would lead to are, as you see on the screen right now. I won't read them word for word. And what kind of competitors do we have right now? Well, Yale has a program along these lines. University of Amsterdam has a program along these lines. Interestingly, at the master's level, their business and society degrees are offered only as joint degrees in conjunction with their standard MBA program. It's a twist. But there's also a number right now of emerging sustainable public policy degrees with which we would probably compete in this space. So once again, it is a content option. It doesn't say anything about the how, the architecture, where you have to bring that conversation together on May 4th. A second option would be a master's in management approach, a MIM. Now, master's in management is actually a specific kind of degree that is pretty well known and specified around the world. In a MIM, students learn business basics, and they usually do it in a 9-month concentrated time frame. They usually do it almost immediately after their undergraduate work, because their undergraduate work hasn't prepared them well enough to enter the world of business. But there is also a large student body that does a MIM part-time, that little by little over the course of perhaps 2, even 3 years, as they're working, they're building their business fundamentals through engaging with a MIM. The kinds of careers here, employers actually see MIMs and MBA job seekers as different talent pools. They're recognized as such. But MIMs are hired as sort of entry-level analysts, entry-level project managers, and entry-level in many business functions, with the idea that within that function they can and will move up into the future. Competitors on this, it is quite crowded, particularly in Europe. This degree began about 20 years ago in Europe, and it is pretty popular in Europe because it's much less expensive than an MBA degree. But there are some top competitors here in the US, including, as you see, Kellogg, Ross, Fuqua, and Tuck. A third option is what we're calling the social impact of markets approach, or the social impact of business and markets approach. In this, students would learn to lead and manage businesses that better harness market forces for addressing the world's toughest problems. The kind of careers here we think would be in this general ballpark. And our competitors for this, it's a pretty crowded field. It's harder to differentiate ourselves within this, because the discourse of social impact, the discourse of social entrepreneurship, this discourse of social responsibility, people and schools are using this all over the place. And so while I personally will say that I don't think that a lot of what's going on in other schools is all that great, and a lot of old wine in new bottles, we would face a pretty important competitive challenge here and have to think really creatively about how to create our space for ourselves, I believe. The fourth option is what is labeled the finance for impact enterprises approach. This is really can be imagined as kind of a subset, if you will, of the social impact of markets approach, the one at the bottom left of this matrix. But in the finance for impact enterprises approach, we would be acknowledging that the jobs in the labor market in the world of finance is growing and will continue to grow. One of the biggest growing areas actually in private enterprise continues to be in and around finance. And so we could choose to really strongly focus and double down and triple down on finance. And in it, students would learn to help business align financial plans, strategies, metrics, government and governance to produce triple bottom line results. Now, some of the competencies, I mean, to get a little bit more under the hood on this, some of the competencies that we would be asking or we would be bringing to students would be understanding capital market theory, preparing and analyzing financial statements, doing capital budgeting, making investment decisions and valuation, thinking about optimal capital structure, but all the way up to understanding financial markets, portfolio theory, equilibrium models of security prices, getting into arbitrage pricing theory, really getting into market efficiencies, and then getting even more advanced than we do right now, or possibly even more advanced than we do right now in terms of analytics, getting into possibly Bayesian inference, time series modeling, event studies, maybe even machine learning for finance. But it would be a really strong emphasis, if you will, on finance, but finance directed at how you can make impact, social impact, just part and part of the DNA of the organization through the finance function. Careers we see along these lines in that particular area. And competitors, well, you know, the specific intersection that I'm talking about here isn't all that common. In other words, a deep focus on finance and social impact. However, what is common are obviously finance degrees. And within finance degrees, I mean, it is pretty common these days to have an elective course or even maybe a track or a specialization related to social impact. So that's, you know, you can make a big matrix out of this. I just went over a little bit about the challenges or opportunities we face with regards to delivery methods. I went over where we're landing right now in terms of content focus, and we may leave May 4th and with new ideas on this, believe me. But that's what May 4th is. It's looking at this matrix and having some I hope energizing conversations about where we might place ourselves on this matrix and how we might evolve over time over the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you for listening.